Wonderful. So welcome again. I think Azrina said everything I wanted to, but let's bring up our panel. So we have Lindsay, who's the operations director at Climate One. Yep, go ahead. We have Sarah, COO of Credit Spring.
Hi.
Chris, COO of Experience. Kelsey, COO of Marvel App. And Phil, COO of Bloom and Wild. Okay, great. Can you guys curve a little bit, just so I can see it? Okay.
Lay on it.
Great. Okay, so a little bit of context for all of you guys of why you want to be a COO. So the organizers, we share a philosophy that for some strange reason, operations is not considered very sexy. So we have a shared vision to really bring to light the fact that operations is cool, is sexy, and there's a lot of amazing people in this industry. So that's kind of the backdrop of what we're doing here. And many of us in the room and on this panel are already COOs, but we suspect that there's a huge generation of up-and-coming aspiring COOs who maybe you're an operation manager, maybe you're a head of ops, you're the number two to the COO, but whatever you are, we hope that this panel will be really helpful in just helping you do a deep dive into your own role and basically get some advice for how to advance your career in ops. So just to set the context, we're going to spend a bunch of time getting to know you guys better as individuals and as COOs. But just to set context, it would be great if you could just say, a little bit about what your company does. So there's an alignment of industry, and maybe like size, number of employees, and industry, so that if you're in the similar industry, you can kind of align with the speaker who's going through a similar experience. We'll start with you, Sarah.
Hi, so my name is Sarah. I'm a recent COO, so I just been promoted 4 months ago, and I work at a company called Credit Spring. So it's a fintech. We do membership-based lending, to put it in a few words. So basically, we have a product that enables you to have access to 2 buckets of money per year, and this is to make people borrow less and only when they need to, and not stay in debt for like long periods of time. So I joined the company when I was the 6th employee, and we are about 14 now. That happened 2 years ago. Maybe a bit more on what I did before. So actually,
we'll save that.
Okay.
We're going to do your journey later. Yeah. Just a bit about your company.
I'm Lindsay. I'm Director of Operations at Climb Online. We're a digital marketing agency. So I was the founding employee, so the first employee of the agency. There's 45 of us now. I knew the founder before, and he said he was going to go on and start this agency, and I was like, yep, I'm interested. So I started off kind of I was officially head of operations, but to be honest, it was as you all know, so many different things when you're in ops. So sometimes I'd be like accounts assistant if I was sending out invoices. Other days I'd be like account manager if I was talking to clients. Or sometimes I was just operations if it needed to be like legal, finance, anything like to do with office management in general. Today it's scaled a bit more, so it's a lot more formal than it used to be. And I refer to myself as the glue. So I oversee like the day-to-day of the running of the agency. So it's kind of like a cross with the managing director's role. We kind of like share that in terms of we manage the agency day to day, but then also I'm like the realistic one who makes sure that the process, we all relate, the processes are in place and that we're still going to be open tomorrow morning. So it's quite a varied role, but I have learned a lot over the last 5 years for sure.
Cool. Chris from Ava Experience. I'm actually the co-founder as well, so if you want to be a CEO, you can just co-found your own business, you call yourself what you want. Just to kind of background, we're a very young company, so we started off January last year, launched the site in May, and we are ultimately an e-commerce site connecting basically people like you in London with really cool experiences, so pottery making, meals out, bottomless brunches, things that people like to do at the weekends and the evenings. And we do that for a slightly kind of novel, we call it a dynamic auction, but you have to go and check it out. But yeah, for context, we're pretty young. There's only 4 permanent employees. We just closed our second funding round, which is why I look tired.
My name's Kelsey. I'm COO at Marvel. We're a software company, and we are a design, collaboration, and prototyping platform for teams that want to create amazing products at speed. Got it. And we're about 40 people, and before this, I was COO at a marketplace startup called Lantern. And as Osrina mentioned, I'm also co-founder of COO Stories, which is a community for COOs that has been running for about 5 years.
Hi everyone, I'm Phil. I'm the COO of Bloom and Wild. We're trying to revolutionize the experience of sending and receiving flowers. So we've been going for 7 years. We are now Europe's largest D2C flower company. We have a head office in London of 100 people, about to launch our own warehouse in Germany with some more people in it. And my experience is the last decade is mainly in e-commerce companies. So this is the 3rd e-commerce company I've worked at.
Great. Okay, so I did some background research, as much as LinkedIn would tell me. So one of you was a camp counselor. Another one of you was governor of a primary school. One of you did risk and audit for corporate banks, and another of you went to law school. One of you went from COO of back office tools for healthcare clinics to COO of a provider of tools to design sleek web and mobile apps. There's only one thing that I see that's consistent among all of you, which is that there is nothing consistent about your career paths. So I'd love to kick us off by just hearing, and I think you got a little bit into this, Lindsay, but how did you get to be a COO? Did you, as a little girl or boy, say, Mom and Dad, I want to be a COO when I grow up? Or did you kind of fall into it or get promoted within? But I'd love to just kind of go down the line, starting with Sarah. How did you get to be in the role that you are in?
So like I said, I've been promoted to COO from head of ops about 4 months ago, but I think the core of the question is more how did I get into ops? So actually I've been, like my past roles, as you said, have been in risk compliance or internal audit jobs in like bigger banks. Not even in London, actually in Paris. And I moved from Paris to London for the role I'm actually having. And I moved from big banks to startup world. So I moved from the largest bank in France to a 6-people company in London, basically, at a job that I've never actually done before, ops, but that's I think a lot of the skills I've been able to build before were applicable to in this role. So as we discussed, Credit Spring is a fintech, so the compliance and risk management side of the ops role is super important. So that's, I would say, maybe the hardest thing to learn if you come into a job in an ops role at a fintech. But what also I've learned in my past jobs before is, so basically my last role, I would come into a team where I didn't know anything, that I didn't know anything about, spend 3 months with them, audit all their processes, and then come with recommendations on how they could do their job better. Quite challenging, but I think what you learn doing that is really applicable in ops. Like we said, you need to jump from a role to another, doing things that don't have anything in common. So this is mostly what made me, I think, a good fit for this job, even though I've never done it before.
Thanks. Lindsay?
My career history has been quite varied. I did a lot of traveling after university, trying to deny that I was an adult. And then when I ended up moving to London, and when I got back, I was working for a travel company because I thought this is the one way to get me back out into traveling. I realized quite quickly that that was never going to happen. There was a lot of more of answering the phone and writing emails to people who were going traveling. And then I was working for a BUNAC, who were a small travel, like work abroad company, and they got bought out by STA Travel, which is the big student travel company you may be familiar with. And we were working at their head office, and that gave me exposure to working in marketing and different like elements of marketing in different departments. And I was actually really lucky because we were bought out as a company when I was working for the smaller non-for-profit. I had an opportunity to work in different departments at STA Travel to kind of see where I was going to fit. And I realized that I actually loved the variation and the diversity of working in all the different departments that gave me exposure to like different roles and doing different things. And I was always quite fascinated with marketing, but I was like, I'm also quite fascinated with HR and how that works. And that ended up, I ended up getting a job from there, working in a pure marketing agency that was a global agency. Again, marketing, I kind of fell into it, but I didn't love the marketing side. I'm still in marketing now, and I wouldn't say that I love the marketing. I love my role within the marketing agency. And I was working more in like consultation, so working with clients and account managers, and again it was another like layer of the role that I loved, and I just realized I actually love doing different jobs, and I still say now I don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up, but I just love like having the opportunity to kind of dabble into different things. And then when I was working at that agency, I met the founder of the company I work for now, and I started working for him pretty much just before he got the first round of funding. So I was part of that process. And then when I started doing the role and was involved in all the different departments and setting up the company and then hiring and then invoicing our clients, doing all the operations things, finding offices. So one day we're finding team members, one day we're finding offices. Then I'd be like writing our contracts for our clients. And then one day I met someone who was doing a COO role, and I said like what I was doing, and they were like, oh, you do what I do, but they were in a big company, and I was like, this is a job, this is a title. So I think for me, it's not being pigeonholed. That's what I love about I'm obviously director of operations, it's a different title, but it is the same role as a COO, and I love the most that it is an opportunity to work in like completely different, every day is completely different. You work with like lots of different departments, lots of different people, and you have the opportunity to explore like different elements of a company from day to day.
Yes, my journey's been pretty varied as well. I started off life actually as a teacher, so I taught GCSE and A-level English and History out in Basildon, which is quite nice because if I'm having a bad day, I just remember the time that Mitchell threw a book at my head from about 3 yards and realised that things aren't quite as bad as maybe they were then. But I moved on from teaching and actually went into consulting, so I worked for PwC, doing kind of large-scale digital transformation work, which I enjoyed and I learned a lot from, but kind of fell into the startup world kind of through what I was doing at PwC, and just kind of fell in love with the creativity and energy of it. Didn't really have a particular skill set. I wasn't really good at law. I wasn't particularly good at finance. I was just kind of good at giving my all, and met some startups, and kind of operations seemed like the perfect role because you could kind of get involved in a bit of everything. I'm always a bit nervous about saying jack of all trades, but I kind of think that's basically what I am. So it meant that I could get stuck into a bit of everything. Moved to head of operations at a small regtech startup, and then happily, one of my friends from university, who is the polar opposite of me, we came up with an idea, and that's kind of where Ava came from. But I've very much kind of taken the operations kind of strand with me.
So I've had a chance to think about it. There's two things I think that are perhaps like relevant or interesting to this group about my journey. The first is that I was very much inspired to become a COO or VP Ops or equivalent by a VP Ops that I was working with in a tech company in Berlin. And I just thought he had the coolest job. So it was like identifying the job that I wanted and then figuring out how I was going to get there. And similar to Sarah, I realized that I was probably not going to be promoted to COO in a company of 200 where I was in Berlin. And also they already had this amazing VP Ops. So I knew that the best possible kind of strategic next move would be to start at a company that was early stage enough that I could really have an impact, even though I didn't have a proven track history of being an operations leader. And that's what I did. I joined Lantern when it was about 5 or 6 people, and grew with them through their seed round, then Series A, and then Series B, and became COO there because I'd sort of proven myself, and they saw that I was the only person for the job. So I think that was a really key move for me when I was sort of unproven, a bit untested, to join somewhere where you can take on a lot of responsibility and grow quickly with the company.
So I'm a relatively late convert to operations. So up until the age of 30, I was a lawyer. So I did philosophy at uni, didn't really know what I wanted to do with a philosophy degree. Sort of did an application for law school because everyone else in my class was doing it. Somehow managed to get into law school. Similar thing at the end of law school, thought, well, I should probably apply to do a training contract at a law firm. Was lucky to get one, and then sort of ended up being a lawyer at a Magic Circle law firm here in London without sort of ever really wanting or planning to be a lawyer. And super early on realised I sort of like probably don't want to be a partner either at this law firm or at a law firm. So I was very restless, moved around a bit, left the UK, went to Sierra Leone for a bit to do human rights law. I came back to the UK and then ended up joining a firm which specialised in the tech industry. At this point, the London startup scene was not like it is now. I was talking a long time ago. I'm not going to show my age. So I ended up having some like really awesome clients. So was working directly with the founders of Farfetch, of Moo, of List, and did like these guys like seed rounds and then a Series A. And basically thought, I want to have myself a piece of this. This seems really interesting. So decided at that point I was going to leave law, and so I jumped ship into a client of mine at the time, which was a super early stage men's fashion e-commerce company, and had a typical cliched roller coaster startup journey, which ultimately ended with the company winding up. And decided I still wanted to stay in startups, and then found myself in a role in a startup which ended up being a rocket ship, which was a company called Birchbox. And I worked in both their New York, London, at one point their Paris office, and they were just going so quickly. And they were these companies where it was just the start of like the unicorn boom, and there just weren't enough of us to do all this work. And they just quickly started getting promoted because it was quicker to promote me than hire someone external. And so ultimately ended up finding myself running the London office of Birchbox, and then 5 years ago joined Bloom and Wild. And the rest, they say, is history.
Wonderful. Thank you guys for sharing those journeys. I think it's interesting to see how some of us kind of accidentally fell into the world of operations, or like a founder took a chance on us. That was the case with myself as well. I was like, I don't know what a COO does, but I'll help you for 6 months, and then you should hire a real COO. And somewhere along the way, it turned into 6 years. So I guess it gets addictive. But yeah, I think we'd like to go the other way, starting with Phil, to dig a little deeper into how to define the role of the Chief Operating Officer. So some of you guys may have read, Harvard Business Review has this article called The Misunderstood Role of the Chief Operating Officer, and it highlights 7 types of a COO. The executor, the change agent, the mentor, the other half, the partner, the heir apparent, and the MVP. So I don't know if any of those archetypes resonate with you guys or multiple of them, but how do you guys define your role as COO? We'll start with Phil and then work our way back.
I read that article actually this morning in preparation.
So did I.
There we go.
What do I do?
Yeah, and the answer I came up with is that I couldn't pigeonhole myself into any one of those 7 models, but could see myself in like multiple of them, almost all of them. I'd say the easiest way to articulate it is what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I probably spend 50% of my time on what I'd class as like developing talent. So either in like one-to-ones with one of my 7 direct reports, or actually like quite often in meetings with other people who don't directly report into me, but I'm trying to coach them on the next sort of stage of their and the company's progression. So that's probably about 50% of the time. 25% of the time I sort of do the partnering in that article with our CEO, thinking about vision, culture, people, new strategic initiatives, etc. So a lot of that 25% of the time, like the two of us are together, either in a room or remotely or on the phone to someone. And then the remaining 25% is, and I can't remember which of the 7 profiles this was, but it's like basically picking up the balls that are getting dropped by other people, not because those people aren't great, but because there's just so much going on, there's so much change that quite often you have new initiatives where there is not a natural owner. So for multiple parts of our business or projects, I've sort of started as the owner until the project has been embedded into the business and I pass it on to someone else. So that's sort of like how my role is at the moment.
And could you guys also share kind of a bit about org design? So like you said you have 7 direct reports. Can you also say what functions you oversee?
Operations, so the operations team, and I'm quite still involved because I have a like personal bias towards it because I enjoy it. But then I do manage our FD, but I don't need to run the finance team on a day-to-day basis. So that's more of a like management and mentoring capacity. Our customer delight function, but likewise, not involved that much in the day-to-day. And then until very recently, when we've hired a VP of international, very involved in the running of our international business.
So the way I think about and define my role is kind of in a couple of different ways. One is I think that the COO role is about delivery of the business. And that means a different thing no matter, well, between businesses, because businesses all do completely different things. So I think that's one of the reasons why the role is so different between companies. So delivery of the business in my company is the commercial and internal ops side of the business. So the CTO delivers on the product and I deliver on the business in the commercial and kind of internal operating capacity. So that is, for me, that is finance, HR, office, and then sales, customer experience, and customer support. So that is my domain. The other way I think about my role is to be the complement to the CEO. So he has areas that he's very strong in, and then he has areas that he's less strong in, and I see it as my job to support him to be the most successful CEO that he can be. And that sometimes means picking up things that he's dropped, and other times it means taking him for a chat and putting my arm around him, being like, it's going to be okay. But yeah, so that's the other way that I see my role, and I think that's another reason why the COO role can vary so much, because CEOs are all different. So those are the ways that I think about it.
I was dreading this question, to be honest, so I kind of struggle with this, defining what I do exactly, especially kind of wearing a co-founder hat and kind of, do I divide kind of my responsibilities between the two? Generally, I see it in kind of 2 ways. One is just making sure that stuff happens in terms of just the business as usual, the business is running and as efficiently as it possibly can. And the rest of the time, it's kind of managing the projects that are going to move the business forward. So essentially, it's all about delivery. So I kind of see, almost with my co-founder hat on, it's defining exactly what's going to be happening. You know, this is what we're doing strategic because we want to do this. And then with my COO hat, it's okay, well, how do we deliver that? And how do we deliver that effectively? And how do we deliver that when I'm trying to deliver all these other things at the same time, and the usual balancing.
And are there particular teams that you divide, like CEO takes some teams, you take oversight, or you kind of
We're
jump?
not really at the level of having many teams at the moment. Kind of individuals, so it's a bit early, but I kind of, it's probably easier to find my role by exception. My co-founder is very much sales and marketing, and if it's not sales and marketing, it sits with me basically.
So it's like an external, internal divide.
Thanks. So I said my role is like being the glue, and what I mean by that is our founder and MD is a visionary, and I'm the implementer, so he has a lot of extreme visions, and they scale with the months. One time he was like, I think we should get a stuffed bear and put it in the office for inspiration, and I was like, excuse me, what? So that's the kind of things we're dealing with. So he has a lot of out there ideas, ranging from like office decoration to client initiatives to we're a digital marketing agency, like I said, and then last year he decided he wanted to run a business event out of nowhere, but he will roll it out or do something that kickstarts it, and then he's like, I've done this. And I'm like, okay, I'll make a spreadsheet. So it's kind of like creating the processes to kind of enable his ideas a lot of the time, but bring together departments across the agency to make sure that they make it happen. A lot of the times it can be like motivating and, you know, it's okay, this will work if he's, you know, promised something to a client on a call and everyone's like, we're never going to be able to achieve that. And it's like, we will, it's okay, calm down. So a lot of counseling sometimes. But I think I oversee HR, finance, our customer service team and our media account managers, so the ones who deliver the marketing campaigns. The only teams that I'm not responsible for are sales and marketing, that's our commercial director. But it's just making sure that the standards of delivery across the agency are the same, that everything that goes out to our clients is of an equal standard, and that we are you know, delivering the best we can across each department. I think we are quite entrepreneurial as an agency, that I find that my biggest challenge is often that everyone works in their own, you know, they're great individual contributors, and it's kind of bringing everyone together and making sure that we're collaborating and we're all on one page, especially when we have quite an enthusiastic, exuberant MD who, you know, he has great ideas and he's very, very motivational, but sometimes that can send people off in the wrong direction to like, what can I do? And then it's kind of like bringing them all back in from the ledge and kind of getting them to all work together. So definitely the glue is a great way that I use to kind of to bring the teams together, but also to like glue the pieces back together. He's gone through with like a hammer.
I kind of like the glue too. I think it says a lot, and the implementer I think also makes a lot of sense. So at our stage, most like I'm supposed to, I'm in charge of HR, compliance, collections, because we do loans, so we need to make sure that we get our money back, customer support, ops, and a bit of product ownership, because we have mostly two products, one that is customer facing and one that we use to deal with repayments, all the customer requests basically. So there's a lot of things. So mostly what I would say I do is whatever we want to do, I would do the MVP version of it, and then I will pass it on to someone as soon as we can hire for that role, or hire for or like delegate it to someone who's going to build up on that with probably more expertise, but it needs to kickstart, like, yeah, you need someone to kickstart whatever project. Same, the glue makes also a lot of sense, because whatever you find some loose end somewhere, you need to make sure the teams talk to each other, have the best knowledge they need to build the product. So yeah, it's super hard to define, and like it makes total sense that it changed from a company to another. But yeah, mostly we make sure that the company keeps on running and complement like great views and ideas from our CEOs.
Great. I think just to add to that, I'm hearing some common themes, but I think the COO role changes a lot when you're early stage and small, where I think you're kind of like all hands on deck, like whatever crap needs to get done. So you're just kind of like a Jack or Jill of all trades, where you have to do everything because there isn't a team to do that thing. And then later stage, after a couple of years, hopefully by then you've hired, another person to do customer support, so you're not the one on the other line. You hire marketing and sales people, and so your team expands, and then I feel like then you start overseeing teams and still picking up balls that get dropped along the way, but like very much I think in the early days you just have to be prepared to do anything that needs to get done. Other people define the COO role as like an integrator or implementer, so it's like this idea of making sure that the big vision actually gets implemented, and not just like you as the superhero, but like getting everyone on board. So I heard a theme around alignment, and there's like this aspect of internal communication to bring everyone along on the shared vision. And definitely glue is a great visual. It's like, I also think of it as like you are at a dam that has holes like popping out and there's water spraying and you're like, do I stick 5 fingers here and like a toe out there? And you know, you're just trying to plug holes. But obviously you can't be everywhere at once. So now that we're getting a sense of like what a COO does, and obviously there's some variability in terms of internal or external, et cetera, I'd love to kind of do a deeper dive into skills. So we're just going to popcorn now, so you don't have to keep doing that up and down the line. We'd just love to hear from you guys. Like, what do you think are the critical skills to being a successful COO?
I think
Anyone can. Yeah, anyone.
I think you need to be pragmatic, and pragmatic meaning like these great visions are like good, and this is what you expect a CEO to be, and to motivate the team to onboard everyone and take everyone on this journey, because you need a lot of trust, but you also need to be able to actually plan and do what you said you would do. So you need to be able to go back to this MVP idea where the best solution probably is not doable with the skills and resources you have. So you need to make sure that you find a way to achieve at least 80% of the goal you had, that idealistic vision, with the smaller amount possible of resources and time. So yeah, pragmatism I think would be a good one.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say solution focused. So just being positive and always having, resourceful in your solutions, because sometimes you don't have like the budget or the people to get together, a solution to solve a problem. I'd say that 80% of my day is being brought things from different departments that are problems that just need to be solved. And sometimes you just have to be quick on your feet, and it may not be the best solution, but it's something that's going to take you a step forward to maybe get you out of that moment of we need to make a decision right now, and then reassess, and then maybe have more of a long-term solution. But yeah, definitely being positive with those solutions, I think has definitely got me through the last 5 years.
I'm not sure if it's a skill or a mindset, but I think curiosity is really important, certainly I find, because I'm having to learn about loads of different areas of the business, tech and product specifically for me, which was something that I didn't know that much about until I came into what I was doing now. I think just being naturally curious, which I am, has helped me to get on top of those things. Well, maybe not on top, but get as on top as I can on those things, and help learn as quickly as I possibly can to understand them, and then as the team kind of grows, then you can kind of start passing it off. But I think that kind of having a natural curiosity about different areas of the business you might not have known about before stands you in good stead.
We're going down the line, but
I know. So structured, COOs.
We can't help
We love
ourselves.
processes.
So I think being organised, obviously, and then having a great work ethic and having empathy. I think work ethic is quite underrated. I think work ethic and drive can get you a really long way. And empathy, I think, is the most important skill in any business, because ultimately every business is a people business. And if you want your business to be successful, your teams and therefore your people have to be successful and thriving and happy. So I think that's a really important one. And also just to say, I don't actually think you need any technical skills to be a COO. I think it's it's sort of like the highest version of a skilled generalist that you can get. And everyone wants to get into tech now, and not many people have technical skills. And so going down the ops route becomes a sort of specialism in and of itself. And I think it's a really smart move to start to specialize in that, because otherwise you're just kind of a person who can do stuff. But if you're a person who can do ops and can make stuff happen in a business, then you start to really differentiate yourself, and I think it's a smart move. Do it.
I think like hard skill sets, like I said, I don't think any is necessary, but I think they will help. Being super analytical, having like some of the traditional type frameworks which people get from careers like consultancy. That's why you get a lot of consultants end up being CEOs. I think that really helps. Being numerate is going to like just make decisions quicker for you. I think being a very good communicator, both in writing and in person, verbally, I think is super important. And then like personality traits, I think zero defect nature will help you get a long way. And by far, the advice I always give people, the most important thing to answer, to work out whether you want to be a COO or not, is you can't have any ego. So if you have any, even, small nuance of ego and you want to be on the front page of that, magazine or, TV article, it's not the role for you. I have an anecdotal story about this. About 3 years ago, we were going to be in a centerfold article in the Times, and I told my wife, and she told everyone, and it was bad timing because my mother and father-in-law happened to be in London and they were staying with us, and my father-in-law walked 15 minutes down the road to the newsagents to go and get that paper, and opened it up, and it was only Aaron, the CEO, in there, and not me. And they'd taken a series of photos of the two of us, and then after I'd left, taken a series of photos of just him. And the one with just him ended up in there. And I got a phone call from him, from Aaron, that morning, just devastated for me. I'm so sorry. And I was totally cool with it. It was annoying that my father-in-law had gone for that walk, but I was totally cool with it. But some people will not be cool with that. And I think it's an important question to ask yourself, would you be cool with that sort of thing? And if the answer is no, then I sometimes get a bit nervous that people don't understand what it is to be a COO.
Thank you for sharing that,
You're
guys.
a silent assassin.
Sorry?
You're a silent assassin.
Yes.
There was a nice article that was shared in Ops Stories actually a year ago, saying that good ops people, you're a good ops person when no one knows who you are.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you basically people notice you when there's problems that are not solved. If everything's running smoothly, then no one knows who you are. And I think you just need to be at peace with that.
Oh man, this is speaking to my soul. I also liken it, so I'll say something about the humility and then another analogy because, it's helpful to imagine. I think you have to have a tremendous amount of humility because being a COO and being in ops, I'm sure for those of you guys know, it's a lot of guts and not a lot of glory. It's a lot of behind the scenes. And yes, your role may be somewhat external and you may represent the company depending on your business, but it's a lot of behind the scenes and it's the duck that's you're supposed to look like you're smoothly sailing across the water, but actually your feet are paddling frantically. I also liken it to a midfielder in football. You're often not credited for achieving the goal, but you made the assist. And maybe you aren't the only goalie, but you're running back on the field to do defense. So it's that kind of the glue, you're constantly running along the field, making sure that the whole play is proceeding. And people generally only notice when there's no toilet paper in your new office's toilet, something like that. Okay, great. So now I want to shift gears a bit to the relationships. And some of you guys touched on this, but I think this interesting thing about us having to manage upwards to our CEO, laterally to the other execs or members of the leadership team, downwards, for lack of a better word, to our direct reports, to our business partners, externally to our customers, to our shareholders, other stakeholders. I'd just love to hear, especially starting with the relationship to either a co-founder, in your case, Chris, or to your CEO. How do you navigate, especially when there can be a lot of stress at the top? So let's kind of start with the hierarchy, and then we'll get into more relationships, but free form.
Yeah, I hope to kick that off. We're conscious I'm slightly different as a co-founder, maybe. I was very lucky that the guy that I co-founded the business with, I've known for 10 years. We were friends at university, so we've known each other very well. And I think the reason that things are working very well at the moment is that we're very conscious of each other's strengths and each other's weaknesses. And we obviously get annoyed with each other. We obviously have times when we disagree. But I think we're able always to come back and constructively work out the best path for the business overall. And I think, if if our relationship was a straightforward CEO-COO relationship, I'd want it to work similarly. And we have a kind of a very close personal relationship where we're able to, you know, if we think someone hasn't performed or we think it's worth calling someone out on something, we do. So I think it very much depends on the relationship, but I think because we have that kind of closeness, we are able to be very honest with each other, but also very conscious of the skills that the other person brings that I don't have.
I feel like I've got an interesting insight into the CEO-COO relationship, because over the course of running COO stories for 5 or so years, we've seen a fair amount of COOs leave their jobs and kind of had the inside story on what was going on. And I would say 8 times out of 10 people leave companies because of the relationship breakdown with the CEO. That partnership that you have and that relationship is so important to your happiness and your success. And I think choosing your CEO or choosing a company with a CEO that you respect and that you think you can work really well with is so important. Don't overlook that if there are red flags. And one of the things I think has worked really well for me at Marvel is that the CEO and I do not really have overlapping skill sets at all. So we're quite complementary in that sense. And in my previous role, the CEO and I were both ex-consultants. So we had a very similar skill set overlap, and we both kind of wanted to lean towards our strengths, which were the same things. And that was very problematic. So yeah, I think choosing your CEO based on mutual respect, but also on complementary skill sets is really important.
I would just add to that is that's very valid, but also understanding what your values are and your strengths and really knowing them. So if you are at an interview or you at that stage where you're deciding to move into a role, that you know their strengths and their values to make sure that they are aligned in some way, because it can be quite a turbulent relationship. I've had lots of instances. I knew him before, so I knew him, so I knew how to work it. I think that over the last 5 years, the biggest investment I've done is in people management and relationship building and personally learning that myself. So just going away and reading as much as I can about it, because you work with so many different personality types, and it's about that idea of parking your ego and knowing when you just need to back down, but then also knowing when you don't need to back down, and it's when you do actually need to step in and challenge, because there's a lot of times in my role where I know now's not the time to challenge and now's the time to just walk away and draw a line, where other times I'm like, no, this is the point where he needs to know we need to talk about this and we need to take it to the pitch and really thrash this one out. So really understanding, I find understanding what my values are and what my strengths are has been a great way for me to learn to deal with those relationships, and not just with with our MD, but with the managers who are my direct reports, and then also obviously building different relationships with everything from suppliers to clients, team members, etc., etc.
Great. Do you want to add anything? Otherwise, I'd love to hear more about, okay, actually that was a lot easier than I thought it would be, but other challenging relationships, I think sometimes execs or fellow leaders can kind of compete a little bit instead of collaborate, especially if your CEO has a hub and spoke leadership style where they like to manage each of you as silos, but not as a cohesive unit. Could you guys talk about kind of, what it's like to work with other execs? How do you make sure you're not in each other's swim lanes?
Well, I think at our stage, we need to be close-knit. There's, basically 15 of us with 5 of us reporting directly to the CEO. So we can't make everything run through him. It doesn't make sense, especially since the CEO is spending, I would say, I don't know, maybe 50% of his time raising money. So not at the office at all. So we can't wait on him to be back to the office to discuss stuff. We need to be able to discuss things between us. Well, it works. For sure, I think the most difficult thing I had to learn these past 2 years is people management, and not necessarily looking downwards, but managing your C-levels or your CEO or whoever actually. is probably the hardest thing you need to learn, and the most challenging one, but that's also the best way to learn things about yourself and how you react to things and to different types of personalities, and there's a lot of negotiation skills you need to build, I would say, and adapt to, like, obviously you won't be like whoever you're talking to, you need to take some time at the beginning of the relationship to see how they work, what makes them tick, what makes them do things, and adapt your communication in order to get stuff done, because the end goal is to get stuff done.
I think part of it depends if, as part of your COO role, you're the number 2 in charge, because not all COOs are. Sometimes CFO might be, sometimes CMO even. That is the case at Bloom & Wild, and that needs to be communicated to everyone. So from the first day I walked in there, Aaron, our CEO, made it very clear that if he's not there, I'm in charge. But that doesn't mean I manage our VPs. I'm not their boss, and I don't interfere with what they're doing, but there does need to be a clear decision maker if the CEO isn't there. But that's, not every COO has that as part of the role, but if you do, it needs to be very clearly communicated to the rest of the company.
One thing I've seen and that I have at Marvel is quite often the COO won't be the co-founder. There are examples where the COO is a co-founder, but quite often it will be maybe a CEO, CTO, founder pair, and then the COO comes and joins that 2-founder dynamic and relationship, and that can cause, I guess, some tensions or things to work out, because you're joining a pair of people who are very used to working together, and you're like the third wheel that's coming in and has to build trust and kind of show that you are there to be an equal partner. But yeah, it kind of comes down to human dynamics and how well can you navigate those things rather than how well can you actually execute in the business. It's, can you show that the other founder that you don't work so closely with, can you show them that you're not a threat, that you actually are here to help them succeed more in the business as a whole, rather than like it being a sort of distrustful relationship.
Great. So let's move a layer down. So as you grow with your company, obviously your team's expanding, like doubling or tripling sometimes from year to year. One of the mistakes that I made is I felt like because I'd been doing everything from the very beginning, it was really hard for me to let go of control and delegate. So could you guys talk about, like, how did you figure out when to let go and delegate, and when to hire either more ops people on your direct team, or to say, okay, I'm no longer going to do customer success and hire that out? Like, how did you kind of navigate your own management as the company grew? Anyone?
When I joined Marvel, it was just a product and just an engineering team, and sort of simultaneously we needed to build an HR function, finance, sales, marketing, customer success, customer support all at once. So typically what you spoke to before, Phil, is that the COO will quite often take on a function and do it themselves and train up a few people and then kind of give away the Lego to that person to run, and then do the same with another function. And that's a really typical thing that I've seen happen. But in the case at Marvel, there was no way that I could be in 5 places at once. So in that case, right from the start, we knew that we needed senior leaders in some of those key functions. So we hired great people right from the start, and kind of they did the building alongside me, but were there to sort of do all the kind of day-to-day stuff right from the start. So those are the kind of 2 models I've had experience of.
I think your personal capacity cannot in any way be an impediment to company growth. You can't walk into a board meeting and tell your investors, so we didn't do that because I personally didn't have time. So there's a quick warning light. If you're, like you say, you can only be in, you can't be in 2 places at one time, and you only have a certain amount of hours in a day, and if you want to maintain some sanity, you are going to have to hire people. And when the value of what you're creating for any particular function is starting to dilute because of your personal time constraints, then you need to hire someone or internally restructure.
Yeah. Also, sorry, I'm hogging, but I think it's an interesting dynamic between perhaps an ops manager who then becomes maybe a head of ops or a COO. You're very into the doing. That's what excites you. That's what you like doing. You like solving problems. And then the switch to being more of a senior leader means you have to be able to let things go. And so it's sort of a positive change, although it might feel uncomfortable because you're no longer directly responsible for making things successful. But you have to get out of the weeds to be able to be a COO.
I found it a really hard transition to do that. And I had a mentor who said to me that I am the what's next person in the company, like looking ahead, proactively looking at like where we're going as an agency in terms of like our key hires, our key growth in different departments, like what's next, because every time I would catch up with this person, they'd be like, you know, what do you do? And I would just be like, and it was like reactive, react to this, react to that, react to this. And then like, I'd be just like, so, and she would just be like, well, what are you thinking about next week, next month? And I'd be like, I don't have time for that because I've got all these problems that I need to solve today when I go back to the office. And it took me a really long time to kind of close the door or stop responding to like the problems and delegate them. And then there was a transition period. It was a short time where I was kind of like, well, what do I do? Because you're kind of like in the same role, but you're relearning the position. It's like a new role, but the same title, same office, the same everything, same team, but you do different things now. And I found that really, really hard. I learned the hard way in a similar situation. I went to a board meeting and I didn't hit a target. We had a new software rollout and I didn't hit the target, and the board were challenging, and the answer to why it wasn't rolled out was because I was like, well, I just didn't have time. And they were like, why didn't you delegate it to X, Y, and Z? And I'm sat there thinking, why didn't I delegate it to X, Y, and Z? Because in my head I was like, I've got to do it myself, got to make sure it's done correctly. So learning the hard way was a good, tough lesson, definitely. But a warning.
I know. You're speaking to my soul again. Okay, so we're nearing 8 o'clock. So I'm going to ask one more question, but I'm just prepping you guys in case you have burning questions, because we're going to throw it out to you guys as the audience to ask any questions that I haven't already asked you guys. But let's talk about work-life balance. So when I was a COO, I like to really envision myself as like this chief firefighter, you know, deftly putting out fires left and right, you know, without singeing a single eyelash extension. But really, most of the time I felt like this very awkward, overstretched, you know, octopus, like trying to do like only 8 projects at once, but like doing nothing well at all. So I'd love to hear like, how do you guys keep sane when you feel like you're constantly putting out fires 24/7? How do you not like let that trickle down to your teams? Like, how do you guys manage stress?
Go on holiday where there's no signal and Wi-Fi.
You just did that.
I just did it last week, and it is my new secret. I found it really hard to just switch off, cut off, whatever you want to call it. I'm someone who's just on all the time, and again, what I was just saying previously about being a problem solver. If you're really curious and you want to help and you want to be involved and you're passionate about it as well, it's really easy to just be constantly doing. I've spent 2019 trying to set boundaries and give myself like times of whether it's during the day to like not read emails and just work on a task I'm doing. I found that does work. I definitely a couple of years ago I moved out of London and I started commuting, and as soon as I started commuting and I had like more to travel and I got tired being on all the time, that's when I was like, okay, this is the chance to just, when you get beyond like London, you start seeing the fields, it's time to just like switch off, and it's okay, and you'll be back in the office tomorrow. And that for me has really helped, just giving myself a bit of a life, because for the first few years, especially if you're in a startup, you are on all the time, and you feel like if you're not on, it's all going to fall apart, and it's because you didn't respond to that email at 10 o'clock at night. And yeah, setting boundaries for me has been a huge learning curve. I'm not great at it yet. Like I say, I have to go where there's like no Wi-Fi and signal to be great at it. And I'd say last week was the first time in 5 years I didn't read emails during my holiday, which I got back and everything was fine. And I was like, why have you not just been doing this? This is normal. And I feel refreshed. So yeah, boundary setting.
I find kind of making sure that I schedule in time with friends so that if I'm working late and I'm meant to be meeting someone and I'm thinking I don't really want to do that, I'd be letting them down if I didn't. So I make sure I actually turn up and then I can kind of switch off. But then also I think kind of being open and honest with people at work, so that if you are feeling a bit burnt out or you know that you need to kind of give yourself some time, one, you don't feel awkward about asking for it, but two, actually they might be coming to you first and saying, actually make sure you leave early tonight, let's go for a drink or let's go play football. And I'm lucky I have that relationship with most of the people at work, and we try and make sure we look after each other. I think it's important.
Yeah, I'd echo the personal boundary thing. Figure out what works for you. So I would rather stay late in the office so that I don't take work home, and that's just a personal boundary for me. The other thing is, if you're firefighting, put out the fire, but then figure out why the fire started and do the work to make sure that next time a fire doesn't start. And I think if you just do that repeatedly throughout your role, eventually the fires get smaller or start less frequently. So it's not just being like that Bop It game where you have to hit the moles popping up out of holes. You're making things better for tomorrow. So yes, today was tough, but you've also then spent a couple of hours with your team figuring out how you're going to make it go more smoothly the next day, and then that same fire is not going to start again.
And to that point, how do you prioritize, right? So I know this is a little bit of a tangent from work-life balance, but how do you, when your CEO is shouting at you because a board report is due, yesterday, and your customers are complaining because your code base is crapped out. When you have so many voices, how do you prioritize which fires to put out first and then also maintain work-life balance?
What will have the highest impact right now?
Yeah.
So I have targets, we set objectives quarterly. That's something implemented a long time ago across all departments, but then I actually don't have objectives set for myself, so I set them myself, and I know what we need to achieve as a company from the board. So I think what is going to impact that kind of resets me into thinking, okay, what's going to impact that, and I shall do that first, and if it doesn't, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
I would say reassess on a daily basis, because also when you're super small, I think it makes probably more sense when compared to when you are bigger, because your priorities will shift on a daily basis. So if you build a backlog, which I actually am doing, but that's not the right way to do it, you will just keep on having this list that will keep on growing, but it will never be cleared. If every day you start from scratch and say, what should I be focusing on today, rather than, I have all this stuff to do, which one should I pick? I think it's probably easier and also makes more sense with the today's priorities, because it's not because probably if you've had something on your to-do list for a month, maybe it's not worth doing.
I would add, it's very tempting to just work on things that feel urgent right now, but that can't be at the expense of the things that are going to be truly impactful to moving the business forward. And sometimes those bigger pieces of work, you never really get time or never get round to doing them because you're constantly doing all the stuff that feels really urgent and pressing right now, but actually probably isn't going to be meaningful to the company's path over the next 12 months. So finding a way to keep yourself accountable to actually spending time to doing the impactful stuff and to work on those forward-thinking projects rather than just help solve this small problem in a team right now today. That's really important. I don't know if anyone's read Cal Newport's Deep Work, but that's really good, being able to ring-fence time to do the deep work that is going to help your company.
I think on the last point, so I do a bit of mentoring, and I always tell my mentees that's one of the first lessons I try and give. because it was given to me by my mentor. If you plot on one axis the amount of hours you work, and on the other axis the value you're creating, it is not a line. It's not a straight line. There are serious diminishing returns as you work more. And I used to work at a US law firm. I can tell you I've been to the end of the chart. And it's seriously diminishing. And I think there's a bit of a myth, especially in startup culture, that you as a person in startups or the company itself will only be super successful if you all work 90-hour weeks. And I've been in startups for quite a long time now, met lots of people with lots of varying degrees of success, and that's bollocks. Some of the most successful people and companies are working pretty standard weeks. And I think it's really important to keep your eyes on the prize.
There's a great article, I think, in the Harvard Business Review called Manage Your Productivity, Not Your Time, and it's saying exactly that, and it's so true. Yeah.
No, I love that. My motto at BitPeso was urgent eats important for breakfast. And so like what you said, Kelsey, resonated a lot because you're just putting out like that thing that either someone shouts loudest about or like your CEO is shouting about, but then you're not always making time to work on the stuff that would actually resolve a lot of the fires from starting in the first place. So if you guys check out Traction, there's a tool called the Issues Log. And so basically it's a way that you just tackle 3 issues in your leadership team meetings, and you'll find that once you solve those 3 issues, it will actually reduce all of the other issues further down the line on your issues log. But with that said, I'd like to take a pause and throw it out to you guys. Any questions from the audience? Okay, I guess I'll use this and then.
Hi, I'm Daisy. Thank you so much for that. It was really interesting. I identified with so much of what you were saying, especially Lindsay, the bear initiative. I have a similar CEO.
We can chat later.
I'm currently trying to build a culture in the team. There's 5 of us. And I was wondering how you built one in your companies, the way you went about it, and what you would recommend.
I can answer that. We have a pretty great culture in that we actually won an agency culture award last year for our team culture, and we basically the key thing is letting people be themselves, and like that's such a really easy thing to say, but I think I have tried to keep consistent since we've started is create roles where people can use it as kind of like a springboard to their career, because that's how I found working in the role I'm in at the startup is like there's so many opportunities to explore different areas, and like if there's something that someone wants to learn more about, or kind of in a startup if they want to explore an area, you've got more availability to do that. I know in larger companies there's not that opportunity to like branch out into different areas. So asking them to kind of bring themselves and their creativity to work, and if there's anything that they want to progress, or if we've said before, we've thrown it out there, does anyone want to start a department? And to be honest, everyone who's suggested it, we've started that department. So we've had creative, we've had websites, we've had email marketing. There has been team members coming to us and saying, I've had this idea. I mean, obviously it's all been within digital marketing, but it doesn't have to be a department, but it could be I've had an idea, I want to explore it, is there any kind of training for that, etc., etc. And enabling people to be a bit more entrepreneurial. The size we're at now, we're allowed to do that. I think in the future, when we grow, it won't always be possible, but that has managed to maintain our culture. You don't always have to throw money at things as well. I think a lot of people think, free food, free drinks, that those kind of things are going to create a culture, and they really don't. It's just allowing time for people to come together and have that creative space where people can work together and collaborate as a team. We do lots of different, like finish a bit earlier. Even in the early days, we used to finish like on a Friday an hour earlier, and I would buy crisps because that's all we could afford, and we would just sit. We would bring all the chairs together and just chat about our week, because we didn't have any budget for anything else, and then that then grew to a few drinks, etc., etc. We now have a beer trolley, so we're going places. So it's things like that, but it's allowing people to just kind of come together as a team and as people, not just as a team. Said that the wrong way around.
I think, because I mean, probably going through kind of a similar thing that you are in terms of we're a very small team, but one thing that I'm very conscious of is that I think the leaders in the team will very much set that culture. You can kind of have grand ambitions and plan lots of socials, but if you turn up and you're grumpy, or you turn up to work and just have your headphones in all day, and that's not the kind of culture that you want to set, then that culture is not going to spread through the team. So I think especially in smaller teams, and probably in bigger teams too, hopefully I'll find out in a few years' time, I think kind of the way that kind of especially kind of leaders behave, being able to call out kind of leaders when they're not behaving in kind of the culture you want to set is really important.
I've got actually a good example of an activity we did in the early days, and we still do it now. So we've just moved offices, and just today someone asked me why we've not done it yet. We have a wall, and it's a shout out wall, and basically all we do is we get post-its, and we print off a picture of everyone and post-its, and people just come, they get a post-it, they stick it on their face, and they just like write something that's like celebrating something they've done that week, something they've achieved, something that they're grateful for that person's done. And it stays on the wall throughout the year, and every probably 4 to 6 months we refresh it. And it's interesting when we moved offices to see how many people brought their post-its with them and have them on their desk. And sometimes you're just standing there like reading them because it's in the kitchen where everyone can read different, and you read things about someone and you're like, I didn't even know that, or I didn't even know they were working on that project. And it's free. You have to buy post-its, but and it's something now we have more benefits that are a bit more elaborate, and it's interesting that that's the one thing now we've done an office move that people asked if we're going to continue to do. So it's a great thing at any stage of any company.
Just maybe a small comment. It has to come from the top, like you said, but you also, I think, need to hire for values and for culture. I mean, yeah, you need to be careful about that culture theme, because it's usually is a synonym with white guys hiring other white guys. But yeah, culture is super important. When we interview people, the first set of questions we do ask them actually are on values. It's linked to this book by Ray Dalio, I don't know if you have heard of. But yeah, we think that principles, so we hire more based on values than on actual skills, because we believe that you can teach people to get some skills, but it's harder to change their values. So yeah, I think it really needs to come from the start and from day one, basically, before they get in the company.
Before we get to your question, I would just add that it's not just how you hire, but it's also how you fire. So I think putting your money where your mouth is, and actually I will just share, we had a really top sales performer, the top sales guy in the whole team, that everybody loved, and he was the golden boy of our company, but it turns out that there was some fraudulent behavior there. And so, even though everyone loved him culturally, one of our values was integrity. So we had to fire him, and we did that loudly. And then we sent a company-wide email that said, this is why, your favorite, salesperson / colleague / office mate was let go. And now we have a whistleblower policy, because also you guys may have known about this and you didn't say anything. So I think really putting, it's not just putting your mission and values on a wall, but actually executing them. And I'm actually in the middle of reading Ben Horowitz's new book, which is what you do is who you are, how to create your business culture. So I definitely recommend that as well. Okay, great. Go ahead.
So I actually have two questions. The first one being mostly towards Phil, but obviously if anyone wants to answer it. So we're currently going through a stage of really aggressive growth, and we have very aggressive growth goals to double our revenue and double our people year on year. And I know that you were working with Birchbox before, which just catapulted. And how did you deal with that from an operational side? And then the second question was, in the ops world, you're often sort of not painted as the bad guy, but sometimes you are the person who has to say, maybe we don't do it that way, or this doesn't, this is fraudulent, or this doesn't fit with our policy, or any of our other policies, and how do you manage that within your company?
Should I say the first one? It's easier. So at Birchbox, there was an explosion of expectation built by some massive funding rounds. So then that led to like loads of targets, and then we sort of did the reverse engineering, working out how many people we needed to fill them. And then you get told you've got to hire ahead to like get to those targets. So you suddenly start hiring. Like, I remember at one point we had 30 new people joining every week, and we'd have a week. We had our weekly stand-up. And it got to the point where there's so many new people joining each week that we didn't even have time for them to introduce themselves. And that's when I started thinking something's a bit broken here. And so that wasn't a great experience. I don't look back on those days with particular fondness. I think it was super chaotic, and culture very quickly diluted as a result. Because I think, to the earlier point, we were like probably not hiring to Birchbox's values quite often because we were trying to get quick hires in. And secondly, it was just, there were so many new relationships being, every time someone new joins a company, you have created whatever, n-1 new relationships, and then that extrapolates out. And there were just so many dynamics we couldn't control. So honest answer is I don't know. Because I don't think we did it particularly well. I think being more phased around your hiring, having like super strong hiring managers, so people who are used to hiring 30 people a week, which is like a very specific skill and not many people have it, being fully supported by a like pretty built out people team. Because if you're going to have that explosion, you need to invest in a really robust people team at the same time. So that was my Birchbox experience. Bloom & Wild, we've done it much slower. We've been going 7 years. Actually, we have 100 people, but the number of people relative to the size of our business is actually quite small. So we have deliberately taken a more measured path in terms of hiring. Maybe sometimes at the compromise of growth, but actually we've focused on growing in the right way, sustainably, but also never diluting our culture. So yeah, I guess I don't think I answered your question, but I've seen it from both sides.
On the idea of when you have to step in when things get fraudulent, I think it's knowing when to have a voice and knowing when to use it, because sometimes there's things that happen all the time that you might want to call out and be like, stop, don't do that, we can't do that, we should never do that, what are we thinking? There's times where I've, with the stuffed bear, have been like, that's against all of my animal welfare morals, number one, but ha ha ha, very funny. Because it's kind of humorous, but then there's been other times where people have been hired and they haven't gone through, the MD's just hired someone because he liked them on a whim, and they've not gone through any of our recruitment processes that have spent months of putting our values into them, etc. And that's when it's been like, no, and that you had a conversation and you kind of demonstrate the impact of why that decision is a bad idea, or if that decision hasn't been made yet and it's toying with it, this is a bad idea because, and having the data to back up why that won't work. I always lead with the data and the numbers, and just be like, this is going to lose us X amount of money, or potentially could threaten this or X, Y, and Z. But then at the same time, knowing when to just be like, okay, this is like an entrepreneurial moment. Let them go and just not say anything, but then knowing when to step in.
On compliance stuff, I would say maybe try and find a way to get to the same result, but using another path maybe. Because for this, compliance and risk management roles, I would say we're often seen as saying no all the time. Yeah, the bad guys. We can't let us grow. Exactly. So the best way is to actually work with the business and try to find the best way to get there, and also get them to, like you said, have a view on how much non-compliance can cost, because sometimes it's not worth doing the bad thing because it's going to end up costing more.
Or saying, hey, this will land the CEO and me as the COO
in
jail.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be the person responsible for doing that.
You touched on it before that ops is a very sort of praiseless job, a praiseless role. Do you get thanks in another way, shape, or form, such as feedback
I was actually just complaining about this on Slack this morning because so my team came up with an idea. The design team and the engineering team actually implemented it, but they had no clue about that was the thing that needed to be done. And they sent themselves something we use that's called tacos. So basically we send ourselves tacos to say thank you or well done or whatever. So the design team sent the engineering team tacos for the implementation, and the engineering team sent the design team tacos for the design. And then we were left out. And we came up with the idea. We actually designed the whole thing. They just no offense to designers, but they actually just put the ideas we had into a tool. And we didn't get any thank you, and I was complaining about it. But that's just a fact of life now.
Where are my tacos?
Exactly.
I feel like it's symptomatic of the role a bit in that, maybe if you're more in a doing role as an ops manager or something similar to that, then there's praise because there's people noticing the quality and the output of your work. But then my experience has been, as I've become more of a manager and less in the sort of weeds, actually if my teams have succeeded, then I've done a great job. But if my teams have succeeded, it's kind of down to them. So it's like a reflect praise down situation. And I wouldn't say there's a huge amount of praise that happens for the senior leadership team, for example. We do wins every week, but that tends to be more business wins rather than pat on back, you did a great job. But it's definitely something that I've had to come to terms with, because certainly when you're kind of a cog, you're just working, and it's great to hear feedback and hear how you can improve and that you've done a great job. But I think there's less of that in my experience.
I rely on now more, personal satisfaction and achievement of things that I know that have gone well or that I've contributed to that have enabled success for the agency. In the early days, there were so many things that I was doing, and they were just getting shouted out to all the wrong people but me, and I've got so frustrated with it that to this day I still do the same thing, but it's changed how I do it now. I used to send our MD a weekly report of all the things that have been achieved in the business, which was basically I've done all of this, but this is what the team have achieved. And in the early days, it was because I started off being hang on, I did that, and okay, hello. But now it's a little more structured. But I also realised when is the right time to pipe up and kind of say, okay, I've contributed to this, etc. For example, if it comes to remuneration, you can't always stay quiet and be I've done nothing, go quietly. But it's, again, like I said, when to say it and when to raise it. Definitely, if I'm in front of the board of directors, I always make sure that I say something that's, constructive, and it's about our strategy and where we're heading. So I have a voice in that meeting, because I think it's really important to know what they see, have awareness of what I'm working on, especially when you have someone who's an MD who's very, energetic and excited about their ideas and their contribution. I've found that sometimes you just have to stand up for yourself, but then also be okay with when there'll be a lot of time when you don't get praise, and that's okay.
I to go back to this taco story, I think my taco actually is when the design team or the product team comes to me to ask for, to me or the team for insight on how customers think or how they would react to a new feature or whatever. I think this proves that you're valued and that your input is valued, but yeah, don't expect it to be
Tacos.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think on that, not to be discouraging and to say it's this constantly thankless job, but one thing that I learned is not to seek affirmation from people who consistently, just for whatever reason, intentionally or unintentionally, because they're too busy or it's hard for them to say thank you, just to not expect that from them, and then to do your part to create a culture of gratitude, and thank yous are shockingly contagious. So I found the more that I affirmed my team, then it opened up the door to say, well, thank you in the times, because I wasn't always a great manager, but like when I was being a good manager, thank you for listening to me and being open and giving me feedback. So I think you can do small things to inculcate a culture of gratitude. Okay. I don't know who raised their hand first, but how about both of you guys?
Okay, so very quickly, I wanted to tap into your collective wisdom and experience of the years of hiring that you certainly did into important roles in the company. I'm part of a very early stage startup. There are 3 of us, and this year we're planning not only to fundraise, but also hire people for a lot of the key functions, CTO, commercial director, and so forth. How do you create a sensible process, or how do you have a good benchmark of who's going to be good enough, not just based on your limited experience and perception, but the role that you're hiring for the years to come?
Big question.
It's a really good question. I think as early as possible in your company's life cycle, having a really robust hiring system. So thinking about, how many rounds of where do I source candidates from to start off with? Do I use recruiters? Do I use myself? Do I cold find people on LinkedIn, et cetera, once I've got some people who are interested, what does my funnel look like? How many interviews do I have? At what point do I test for X? What point do I test for Y? Is there a skill set which I'm expecting them to have, which I don't already have in the company, so I have to bring on an external person to advise, which is something we do quite a lot, especially with technical hires. We will have people outside of the company join part of the interview process. What is everyone's role in that interview process? Are you there to test for values? Are you there to test for technical smarts? Having all of that written down and making sure you're fairly consistent with your application of it, which will change on a person-to-person basis, depending on the role, but the structure, you can get fairly consistent. I think is a super important job to do. And if you've never done it before, there are a ton of books on it, and you ask your network about how to do it, and that's ultimately why a lot of people start creating people teams with experts who've been doing this for 10 years. If I was you, I'd sort of start fleshing out what you think a good interview process looks like to start off with, and where you think world-class people will be and how you're going to tap into them. I'd get that down on paper pretty early on.
I think of it, agree with everything. I think of it kind of like a sales funnel, in that your primary goal is to get in front of as many great quality eyeballs as possible. And the 3 of you, okay, there's only 3 of you, but the 3 of you probably know 1,000 people between you. So, and some of those will be really good. So that's one place to look. And then the other place is just obviously all the jobs boards, and just go for it, because at that point you need to get your job, you need to get in front of loads of people. And then your job description's job is to convert those eyeballs into thinking they want to apply. So making sure that your job description sounds incredible, like the opportunity of the year. Because if a great person sees it and decides not to apply, then that's your job description has let you down. And then once they're in the funnel, then to all the things that Phil spoke to. But the primary thing is volume of great people in your sales funnel.
I also, probably shouldn't say this controversial view, would not get too fixated on I know what role you're hiring for, but let's say it's a technical role. You don't need to right now be hiring for your CTO who's going to be there in 10 years' time. Yeah. It's highly unlikely that is going to happen. It's not the way most people join and stay at startups. So I think you can be pragmatic and give yourself a bit of space to, you don't have to find someone who's going to be there for 10 years. You have to find someone who can do a decent job for you for a couple of years. That's fine. Or even less. And that is fine. So you can take the pressure off yourself by thinking like that. It becomes more difficult as you become bigger. Because, my point earlier, you have more relationships which are impacted by people not being a success. But one of the luxuries of being a small early stage company, and I've been at one, is you can get hiring wrong and it's not the end of the world.
I think, just in the interest of time, last question, sorry.
What's one book that gave you the most for this role or just professionally?
I'm going to tack onto that, because that was actually my second to last question. Any books, tools, or tech that significantly you swear by or made your life easier?
The First 90 Days, I can't remember who wrote it, it's a really good book. I've read that. If you just type in First 90 Days, it'll come up. It's a really great book. It's about first 90 days in a role. But I've read that a few times now, and it's helped re-engage me in different stages where we're at as a company. I think it's a really great book to read, no matter what stage you are at in your career.
Hard Things About Hard Things, everyone always says that, but it's like probably, in my opinion, one of the best ones out there. It's another Ben Horowitz book. Tools, so it depends on what type of company. There's one tool I can't live without, and it depends what your management style is. So we have a data visualization tool called Periscope, and basically has dashboards to show me exactly how every single part of the business is performing. And it just saves so much, me going over to someone's desk, or me hassling someone, or me slacking someone and saying, how's this going? I just can get a really good read of the health of our company at my fingertips, on my phone, on the train into work. And I find that I think it's been a game-changing tool for how we run our company.
Wow. I think the book So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport is a classic. It's really good for thinking about your own path and your journey, and how to use all of the momentum that you've built up already in your career to make the next kind of big leap forward. And yeah, I thought that was a really good book for thinking through kind of where to head next, and how to be so good they can't ignore you.
In terms of tools, I mean, for we, obviously a very early stage business, so in that context, I wouldn't be scared of just relying on things like Google Sheets. It's actually incredibly powerful, and we run our entire business off it. And we've done what I think is some relatively smart things with Sheets speaking to each other and some slightly clever formulas. But we're not actually at the point where we will get there soon, hopefully. But we're not at the point where we actually need anything more than that. And it's pretty cheap. And it does the job well, so I don't feel like you need to have or be using other tools if actually something like Google Sheets will work for you at the moment.
In terms of tools, an obvious one, Slack. That just speaks to how much you need to be connected to other teams and other team members. And I wouldn't add a book, but maybe a source of articles that I tend to find really interesting. The Shane Parrish mailing newsletter. There's good insight, especially once again into how to deal with other people and how to deal with different types of personalities and ways of thinking.
I'm going to jump in here. The book that I wish I had read about 3 years into my 6-year career as the COO was Scaling Up by Vern Harnish, which is Rockefeller Habits, which I know some people in the audience have actually implemented in their orgs and know even more about it. So Scaling Up, love first round review for all articles on culture, management, et cetera. And then for tools and systems, I've had sort of a rocky relationship with OKR methodology, but still stand by it because I think it's worth trying. And if you're into OKR methodology and want to learn more, I recommend Measure What Matters by John Doerr. And then I had one more tool that I was going to say, but must not have been that important. Okay, so in the interest of time, just want to do one last pass. Any final words of advice for the ops managers in the room who might be thinking about being a COO? Anything? We've covered a lot of ground, but I guess just a tagline or one final piece of advice that you wish you'd known before you became a COO.
I mean, it's a pretty plain one, but you need to like what you do, and like complexity and doing different things. And I think that's the only way to survive.
Yeah. Yes, you need to love it. You need to figure out ways to build up your resilience, definitely. And also, I'd say just stick at it and keep going. Like what we mentioned before about being general and a generalized role, I think that no matter what your specialism now is in your roles, you could go on to take a senior ops role, because there's so many different variations of what the role looks like. So yeah, definitely just stick at it.
Yeah, I think I stand by my previous point about curiosity. I think that's really important. And then secondly, and this probably stands true for most roles, the ability to kind of be very self-reflective. So if things go right or wrong, being able to kind of sit back, kind of think about what you've done, what the team have maybe done and why that was. And if you can identify things to improve and push yourself forward the whole time, then you don't necessarily need other people to help you grow.
The thing I've benefited from the absolute most is having a community of other ops leaders to lean on. So it's never too late to start building that community. And I don't just mean being part of ops stories or going to events, but having 3 or 4 or 5 people that are on speed dial for you, so that when you're facing something new that you've never faced before, or you just need to soundboard or sense check something, that you have those speed dial ops leaders to reach out to. And I can't tell you how much time that saved me over the years. So build those speed dials.
I'd say focus on being indispensable to the company you're currently at, rather than fixating about like trying to leap up the career ladder at another company. If you're indispensable at your current company, you will get awesome opportunities, either at the company you're at or externally. You don't get many awesome opportunities if you're not already indispensable at your current company.
Great. Well, I'd like to especially thank you guys as panelists. I mean, it's been definitely cathartic for me, hopefully cathartic for the rest of you guys, but you've really taken time out of your busy schedules to share your words of wisdom and thoughts, so thank you. Lots of tacos down the line. Yeah, so I just wanted to echo that the COO role can often be a lot of guts and no glory, as we've seen. But know that you're our heroes, and I think you've presented great role models for those of you guys in the audience who are a bit earlier in your ops careers. I want to give a special shout out to Azrine and Astrid and Lindsay too, who played a dual role of panelist and co-organizer. In typical COO fashion, did a ton of the behind the scenes work. This is the biggest event that either community has put on. With full sponsorship, so like huge kudos and tacos to you guys for doing so much of the heavy lifting. And I just want to say, like, I really hope that this is the first of many collaborations for our communities to continue to show that ops is like an amazing career, and that is something that little boys and girls should grow up to want to be when they grow up. And then just want to thank you guys. We know that a lot of you guys may not be in the most affirmed, appreciated jobs, but know that you're the ones that keep your companies running and keep your CEOs, and the rest of the leadership team from falling apart. So just want to say you're not alone, and kudos and tacos for all the work that you guys do. As I think Kelsey was attesting to, the power of community is amazing. And I know that I've experienced that personally in cohort, and I hear constantly how much that happens in ops stories. So definitely, like, if you're interested in joining one of our communities, feel free to reach out to us or talk to us afterwards, because we are really, really seeking to increase the amount of COO-specific resources and events that bring us together and allow us to share the collective knowledge that we have as ops leaders. And so just some final logistics. We're gonna wrap up now, but please consume, because we don't wanna carry this extra alcohol or soda or food, etc. So please definitely consume more. We would also love help if you could just pitch in. We've got to clear the chairs and leave Pecan's place better than we found it. So we'd love for you guys to help do that. So we're gonna allow y'all to continue to network and hang out and hopefully meet other great ops people until, is it about 9? 9:15?
Maybe 9:15.
About
But
perfect.
if anyone wants to keep mingling and talking, there is a pub which they might forgot, but it's on the first side. I think it's
Fox and Anchor. Yeah.
Yes, so basically, we're gonna let you know when we need to leave the building so that Hannah actually can go home because she's been with us all this evening. But yeah, we still have some leftover budget actually for the drinks in the pub. So if you finish all these,
Start here.
This is cool night. We can go on and continue
Perfect. Thanks so much. Great. Thanks, and have a great rest of your night.